My name is Pete Lyle. I'm Vice President of International and Rental Sales for Schaefer Ventilation. We're a manufacturing firm located in Sauk Rapids, Minnesota, right on the prairie. We were founded in 1951 and we started with just a motor and a blade. We have slowly built the business to a national business selling thermal comfort solutions. We are a contract manufacturer for other items as well, but primarily all the products are produced locally and manufactured right here in Sauk Rapids.
Marketing is becoming more and more important. I mean, still the majority of our sales are domestic, but as a company, there are limits to growth if you only serve the domestic market. And we embarked on an initiative to significantly increase our export sales last year with various staffing initiatives, with various training initiatives, and with investments in sales and marketing efforts outside of the country.
Having an international presence is very important. There's a lot of reasons, but primarily it helps us expand our sales growth into markets that we're maybe not competing as hard as we are domestically. So in the case of the U.S., on a single contractor bid, we might be going up against 5 different fan manufacturers, where internationally we might be one of 2 or maybe the sole or principal fan manufacturer involved in a contract. The other part is, one of the other important aspects to doing business internationally is that it reduces our seasonality of sales. We really follow a bell curve, if you will, in that when it's hot, Schaefer's pumping out products and pumping out inventory for sale. In the winter months, when we have to rely solely on heaters, obviously the sales are going to decrease a little bit. So if we can get into markets, or because we've been in markets where we have opposite seasons, we're able to reduce that seasonality of sales.
We're still learning our way a little bit. Actually, we're learning our way a lot. And the fact is that it's really important not to assume that things that work in the United States, traditions, norms, mores that work in the United States, work elsewhere. It's important to respect cultural differences, to respect different business differences, and all of those sorts of things. So to some extent, the way we approach every country is, if we don't know what the norms and traditions and behaviors are, we attempt to learn them. We do things like, if we're going to a new country, don't go to your most important prospect first, just in case you blow it. Work with someone less important, so you sort of learn the ropes, sort of practice, and sort of build your skills that way. The country by country, there are lots of differences. One of the biggest differences, it's almost a universal difference, and that is that in the United States, we're such an efficient country that relationships matter, but an awful lot of sales happen by email, by phone, by fax, those sorts of things. None of these things happen in other countries. It's personal relationship and trust is very, very important. So you need to meet face to face. You need to break bread. You need to know your customers and know your partners much better than you do in the United States.
The first thing I would say is the culture, because how to approach a different person from a different culture, you have to know how. And me being from Latin America, for me it's easy to communicate to people from Latin America, coming from Mexico, Argentina, Colombia, Ecuador, and it has a good response, and like sometimes the ways that they communicate is not like here, like emails. You have to call them and explain what you're doing in different ways so you can get their attention.
Recently, when I was in Puerto Rico, I met one of Schaefer's clients that we've been working with for a few years, and we probably spent a good 20 minutes to a half hour talking about social things, baseball, the beach, how Puerto Rico was, what I thought of it, etc. After about 20 or 30 minutes of talking, we then moved on to business topics and talked about that for a little bit of time, and kind of went our ways. That's very different than compared to when I was at a trade show in Las Vegas, primarily serving domestic clients, where customers would come up, say, hey, I want 2 of these and 3 of those. Tell me where to sign, and they'd be off to the next person. And these are clients that we've been working with for 10, 20 years. So very different in approaches to business.
There are a lot of countries, especially if you're doing government business, especially small emerging countries. The reality is that people are impoverished. People do things that they shouldn't do. Again, there are very strict anti-corruption laws in the United States. And again, if you're selling to government, you just have to suspect that there's a bribe going on somewhere, and you have to be very careful with selecting your dealers and all that kind of stuff, not to be doing that. And of course, there's always the conflict that the company that's going to get the deal is going to be the company that somehow makes it happen. So it's a very sort of anxiety-provoking sort of thing that you have to deal with. But the reality is you have to keep this in mind as an American exporting. I have sort of an interesting story from my years in Latin America. Argentina not so much, but in Colombia in particular, we had to fill out. I had to go to the oil fields all the time, and we had lots of expenses. We had hotels and planes and meals and all those sorts of things. And I think it was category 14 on our expense report was other. And other was you didn't need receipts for other, and oftentimes it was the largest single expense on any given trip to the field, because we would be driving or whatever, flying to the oil well with our equipment, and some young guy, relatively young guy with an M16 would stop you and would point out that, you name it, right? Your license tab was incorrect, or your left turn indicator didn't work, or whatever it was, and you were not going to get to the oil well. That was all there was to it. You were not going to be able to execute your service, and the reality is that bribing is part of what you need to do to get the work done. And I was young, and whatever you sort of do what you need to do to get the job done. I worked for sort of a macho company. The macho company was obviously fully okay with this. I came back from working in these countries and went to business school and took an ethics class. And of course, what you learn in business school is take your ethics with you. Take your American ethics with you. Well, to this day I still don't know the answer, because if I had taken my American ethics with me to Colombia, I would not have gotten my first job done. I mean, I would have been fired by the company for being unsuccessful, right out of the chute. And these weren't large bribes, but it was continuous. I mean, you had a big wad of bills in your pocket, and you were using them all the time. So again, these are sort of the judgment calls one has to make as one works in countries that aren't the same as our own.
The main challenge that stands out in exporting for me is the cultural and language barriers. Obviously they're enormous. So part of the due diligence process is understanding what people have for expectations on the ground. What are their primary factors for purchasing? Is it driven by price? Is it driven by relationship? Those all lump into one category, and that would be cultural barriers. So that's one of the larger barriers to entry into a market. Secondarily, we maybe have local manufacturers or local distributors who benefit from no freight costs and lower cost labor markets. So those are all factors, two of many factors that contribute into a competitive situation.
I mean, obviously, international business is outcomes are very ambiguous. It's in the United States, when you're selling in the United States, right? You can take currency for granted. I mean, if I price it at $100, I will get $100, and it won't have changed in value. I mean, it may have changed in value, but our costs change at the same time. So, the rules won't change. There are all these things that are sort of, business is messy, but it's an order of magnitude messier when you're traveling internationally or working internationally. So So, you know, in Taiwan, we dealt with SARS. In Argentina, we priced our services in, what were they called back then? Pesos. I presume they were pesos 20 years ago. And one day, well, inflation was 10% a month, and they had 90 days to pay, so we were giving them a 30% discount just by letting them pay in 90 days. And then one day they devalued their currency by 4 orders of magnitude, by a factor of 10,000. So, I mean, these things make it very hard to, you know, very hard to sort of predict how business is going to go. In Colombia, the bank where we kept our money in Colombia, it just went bankrupt one day. It just sort of closed. It actually had $5 million of our dollars, which we never saw. It just went away. And again, you know, whatever. Eventually, that money would have been moved, you know, to corporate coffers, but that's where it was parked, and it just disappeared. These things happen. You know, as you've probably heard other stories from Schaefer, you know, Egypt is potentially a very interesting market for us, except, you know, after our first business development trip to Egypt, apparently we spawned a revolution. So, you know, Egypt, we still haven't been back to Egypt, despite it still being a, you know, an excellent place to do work, because it's really kind of an unstable place, and it's not obvious who the decision makers are. So again, there are just a lot more potential outcomes from an initiative in these countries than there are in the United States. In the United States, I mean, you sort of win or lose, and you know, generally you win or lose on your merits, or by being outsold, or by outselling. There are all kinds of ways to win and lose internationally, and you sort of have to live with them. I think it's very important to sort of have awareness of the risks up front, have awareness of the, you know, the vagaries of international business before you do it, and sort of have the budget to be able to absorb some of these lack of successes, because just the same way you can have these terrible outcomes, you can have these wonderful outcomes that sort of appear out of nowhere. And at the end of the day, to be a successful company and for us to be a successful country, we need to be able to export. And you need to work away at this stuff. But you have to just go into it with your eyes open. It is not as simple or as sort of I don't know, predictable as doing business domestically.
Well, advice for international students, I have an advice, because to work hard in order to get an internship, you know, and to see, you know, that if you come to these countries, like, to take the knowledge back to your country and apply it, you know, and that's what I'm trying to do, you know, take all this technology in America and take it to Latin America, where there's the growing need, you know, for this kind of equipment.
If I were to give people advice who are still in college, study abroad. You only get an opportunity like this while you're in college. If you can, try to learn a second language. Even if you don't become fluent, at least understand where people are coming from. Knowing and understanding other cultures, especially in today's age, is really important. One thing I like to tell people is almost everybody in the world either A, speaks English, or B, wants to speak English. If you're an American, you need to pick up the slack and learn another language.
The single best piece of advice that I got in business school, which I still tell most people, is there isn't a person in this room, right? If you're talking to a set of students, there isn't a person in this room who wouldn't benefit from being a salesperson for 2 years. Because, you know, you can pretend to manage a business and you can pretend to do this and that, but unless you have tried to sell a product to a customer and gone through many of the issues that we're describing, whether it's domestically or internationally, it's kind of all theory. And so, you know, before you sort of, you know, wed yourself to being a marketing person or being a general manager or being a product manager, go sell for a while, learn what makes customers tick, understand the range of things that make customers tick, understand how to sort of influence them and get them to make a purchase, and then use that experience, you know, in whatever job you want to have after you've been a salesperson for a couple of years.